Black Widow marked an important milestone within the Marvel Cinematic Universe because it finally placed Natasha Romanoff at the center of her own story after more than a decade of supporting appearances. While the film delivers spectacular action and espionage, one of its greatest strengths is a remarkable cast assembled to bring these emotionally layered characters to life. Each performer entered the project with an established career, yet each also found new opportunities through the film. Together, they transformed what could have been a straightforward superhero adventure into a surprisingly intimate family drama wrapped inside an international spy thriller. Leading the cast is Scarlett Johansson, whose portrayal of Natasha Romanoff had already become one of the defining performances of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Before joining Marvel in 2010 with Iron Man 2, Johansson had already established herself as one of Hollywood's most respected actresses. As a child performer, she gained attention in films such as A Horse Whisperer and Manny and Lo, demonstrating maturity far beyond her years. She later transitioned into acclaimed adult performances with Lost in Translation, Girl with a Pearl Earring, Match Point, The Prestige, Vicky Cristina Barcelona, Lucy, Marriage Story, and Jojo Rabbit. Her ability to balance emotional vulnerability with remarkable strength made her uniquely qualified to portray Natasha Romanoff, a character whose painful past constantly clashes with her desire for redemption. By the time Black Widow entered production, Johansson had portrayed Natasha for over 10 years across numerous Marvel films, including The Avengers, Captain America, The Winter Soldier, Avengers, Age of Ultron, Captain America, Civil War, Avengers, Infinity War, and Avengers, Endgame. Audiences had watched Natasha evolve from a mysterious former assassin into one of Earth's greatest heroes. However, much of her background had only been hinted at. Black Widow finally allowed Johansson to explore the emotional scars hidden beneath the confident exterior. Rather than simply playing an action hero, she portrayed a woman haunted by guilt, betrayal, and the search for family. Her performance became one of the most emotionally grounded in the Marvel franchise because it focused less on superhuman abilities and more on human resilience. The film also represented a major turning point in Johansson's relationship with Marvel Studios. Black Widow served as her farewell performance following Natasha's sacrifice in Avengers, Endgame. Shortly after the film's release, Johansson became involved in a highly publicized legal dispute with Disney concerning the movie's simultaneous theatrical and streaming release. Although the disagreement attracted enormous media attention, both sides eventually reached a settlement and maintained a professional relationship. The film ultimately closed one of the longest and most successful character journeys in modern blockbuster cinema, while reinforcing Johansson's reputation as one of Hollywood's most versatile leading actresses. One of the film's biggest surprises was Florence Pugh as Yelena Belova. Before joining the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Pugh had rapidly become one of the most celebrated young actresses of her generation. Her breakthrough performances came in independent films before earning widespread recognition with Lady Macbeth, where she displayed extraordinary emotional intensity despite her young age. She continued impressing critics with Fighting with My Family, Midsommar, and her Academy Award-nominated performance in Little Women. By the time she entered Black Widow, audiences already recognized her remarkable ability to portray emotionally complicated characters. Pugh brought a refreshing energy that contrasted beautifully with Johansson's more restrained performance. Yelena often uses humor to hide years of trauma, creating a character who feels simultaneously broken and optimistic. Her sarcastic observations, playful teasing of Natasha, and unexpected emotional vulnerability quickly made her a fan favorite. The chemistry between Johansson and Pugh became one of the film's greatest strengths because it genuinely felt like two estranged sisters struggling to reconnect after years apart. Their relationship gave the movie its emotional foundation and elevated many scenes beyond traditional superhero storytelling. Following Black Widow, Florence Pugh's career continued its extraordinary rise. She became one of the central figures in Marvel's future storytelling, while simultaneously continuing to receive acclaim in dramatic films. Her performance demonstrated that she possessed the charisma, emotional depth, and action skills necessary to carry major blockbuster franchises without sacrificing the artistic credibility she had already earned through independent cinema. David Harbour joined the cast as Alexei Shostakov, also known as the Red Guardian. Before achieving worldwide recognition, Harbour spent years working steadily across film, television, and theater. His career included supporting appearances in films such as Revolutionary Road, Quantum of Solace, End Watch, and The Equalizer. However, his global breakthrough came through the television series Stranger Things, where he portrayed Sheriff Jim Hopper. Harbour's ability to combine humor, toughness, and deep emotional warmth made him an audience favorite around the world. In Black Widow, Harbour delivers much of the film's comic relief, while never allowing Alexei to become a simple joke. The former Soviet super soldier constantly boasts about his glory days, yet beneath his exaggerated confidence lies a deeply flawed father figure seeking forgiveness. Harbour expertly balances comedy with genuine regret, creating a character who is both entertaining and surprisingly sympathetic. His scenes with Johansson, Pugh, and Rachel Weisz capture the awkwardness of a dysfunctional family forced to confront years of unresolved pain. Rachel Weisz portrays Melina Vostokov, a brilliant scientist whose complicated moral choices blur the line between victim and collaborator. Long before joining Marvel, Weisz had established herself as one of Britain's most respected actresses. She gained international recognition through films such as The Mummy and The Mummy Returns before winning the Academy Award for The Constant Gardener. When Black Widow premiered in 2021, it arrived under circumstances unlike almost any other Marvel Cinematic Universe film. Originally scheduled for release in 2020, the movie was delayed multiple times because of the global COVID-19 pandemic. As a result, audiences had waited more than a year for the next major Marvel theatrical release following Avengers, Endgame, and Spider-Man: Far From Home. This unusual situation transformed Black Widow into more than just another superhero film. It became a symbol of Hollywood's attempt to recover after one of the most difficult periods in modern cinema history, while also representing a long-awaited recognition of one of Marvel's most beloved characters. Perhaps the film's greatest cultural significance lies in its timing. Natasha Romanoff had been a central figure in the Marvel Cinematic Universe since her debut in Iron Man 2 in 2010. For over a decade, fans repeatedly questioned why nearly every major male superhero received solo films while Black Widow remained a supporting character despite her popularity. Characters like Iron Man, Captain America, Thor, Ant-Man, Doctor Strange, and Spider-Man all received individual stories, while Natasha continued appearing primarily within ensemble films. The release of Black Widow finally addressed years of discussion surrounding gender representation within blockbuster franchises. Although many viewers believe the solo film should have arrived much earlier in Natasha's story, its eventual release still carried enormous symbolic importance. It demonstrated that female-led superhero films had become a permanent part of Hollywood rather than isolated experiments. Earlier successes such as Wonder Woman and Captain Marvel had already shown that audiences enthusiastically supported women as the central heroes of major action films. Black Widow reinforced this trend by proving that audiences were equally interested in grounded spy stories led by complex female characters rather than relying exclusively on supernatural powers or cosmic adventures. The film also contributed to changing perceptions about what defines a superhero. Natasha Romanoff possesses no superhuman strength, magical abilities, or advanced technological suit. Instead, she survives through intelligence, discipline, tactical skill, and psychological resilience. In a cinematic universe filled with gods, aliens, and enhanced soldiers, Black Widow reminds audiences that courage often comes from ordinary human determination rather than extraordinary abilities. This grounded approach resonated with viewers who appreciated heroes overcoming impossible situations using experience and resourcefulness instead of overwhelming power. Another major cultural contribution involved the portrayal of female relationships. Many action films historically centered on rivalry between women or positioned female characters primarily as romantic interests. Black Widow instead places sisterhood at the emotional center of its narrative. Natasha and Yelena Belova share a relationship built on affection, resentment, humor, guilt, and mutual respect. Their interactions feel authentic because they disagree, tease one another, and slowly rebuild trust after years of separation. Rather than competing for attention, both characters strengthen each other's emotional journey. The dynamic between Natasha, Yelena, Melina, and Alexei also challenged traditional family narratives commonly seen in action cinema. Their family was never biologically authentic during their childhood assignment, Yet the emotional connections formed during those years remain genuine. The film explores the idea that family can be defined by shared experiences, emotional bonds, and personal choice rather than blood alone. This message resonated with many viewers from adoptive families, blended households, and communities where emotional support comes from people outside traditional family structures. Black Widow also became part of broader conversations regarding psychological trauma and recovery. The Red Room program represents systematic manipulation, abuse, indoctrination, and loss of personal identity. While presented within the context of a fictional spy organization, many audiences recognize parallels with real-world discussions about coercive control, human trafficking, emotional manipulation, and institutional abuse. Without becoming overly explicit, the film acknowledges that healing from trauma requires confronting painful memories rather than ignoring them. Yelena Belova's character particularly resonated with younger audiences because she openly discusses emotional pain while refusing to allow it to define her future. Her combination of humor and vulnerability reflected a growing cultural willingness to discuss mental health more openly than previous generations. Instead of presenting emotionally damaged characters as permanently broken, Black Widow suggests that recovery begins through honesty, supportive relationships, and reclaiming personal agency. One of the film's most discussed cultural moments involved Yelena humorously criticizing Natasha's famous superhero landing pose. The playful exchange quickly spread across social media, becoming one of the movie's most quoted scenes. Fans embraced the joke because it gently acknowledged a long-standing visual trope common throughout superhero cinema. The scene demonstrated Marvel's increasing willingness to laugh at its own conventions while maintaining affection for its characters. Countless memes, videos, fan art, and online discussions referenced the exaggerated landing pose long after the film's release. The opening sequence also generated widespread discussion for its unusually serious tone. Rather than beginning with immediate action, the film opens by showing young girls being manipulated into lives of violence before transitioning into a haunting title sequence accompanied by a slowed-down version of the song "Smells Like Teen Spirit." This unexpected creative decision immediately distinguished Black Widow from many previous Marvel films. Audiences and critics praised the sequence for communicating the emotional horror of the Red Room while avoiding excessive graphic content. It remains one of the darkest and most artistically ambitious openings in the entire Marvel Cinematic Universe. The production of Black Widow was one of the longest and most complicated in the history of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Although audiences finally saw the film in 2021, discussions about giving Natasha Romanoff her own movie had existed for nearly a decade. Fans had requested a standalone Black Widow adventure ever since Scarlett Johansson first appeared as a mysterious Russian spy in Iron Man 2. Each subsequent Marvel film increased the character's popularity, yet the studio continued prioritizing other heroes. It was only after the enormous success of films centered on characters like Black Panther, Captain Marvel, and the growing demand for more diverse storytelling that Marvel Studios fully committed to producing Black Widow. One of the earliest creative decisions involved determining where the story should fit within the Marvel timeline. Instead of continuing after Avengers Endgame, where Natasha sacrifices herself to obtain the Soul Stone, the filmmakers decided to place the story between Captain America, Civil War, and Avengers Infinity War. This decision allowed the audience to spend one final adventure with Natasha while exploring the period when she was separated from the Avengers and living as a fugitive. The placement also gave the writers freedom to tell a self-contained spy thriller without constantly interfering with the larger Marvel storyline. Marvel selected Kate Shortland to direct the project, making her the first solo female director of a Marvel Cinematic Universe feature film. Before joining Marvel, Shortland had earned international respect through intimate dramas, including Somersault, Lore, and Berlin Syndrome. Unlike many blockbuster directors who came from visual effects or action backgrounds, Shortland was primarily known for character-driven storytelling. Marvel specifically wanted someone who could emphasize Natasha's emotional life instead of focusing exclusively on explosions and large-scale spectacle. Shortland approached the film less as a traditional superhero adventure and more as a story about damaged people attempting to reconnect after years of emotional separation. During pre-production, she frequently discussed the importance of making the action feel personal rather than simply exciting. Every major fight scene was designed to reflect character relationships. When Natasha fights Yelena early in the film, for example, the choreography resembles two sisters arguing through physical combat rather than anonymous enemies exchanging punches. This philosophy influenced nearly every action sequence throughout production. The screenplay underwent numerous revisions before filming officially began. Marvel's development process often involves multiple writers refining scripts while adapting to the constantly evolving continuity of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. The creative team wanted the movie to satisfy longtime Marvel fans while remaining accessible to viewers unfamiliar with the previous films. Balancing those two audiences required careful restructuring of dialogue, pacing, and exposition throughout development. One of the production's biggest priorities was making Natasha's world feel grounded despite existing within a universe filled with gods, aliens, and advanced technology. The filmmakers drew inspiration from classic espionage thrillers rather than fantasy adventures. Movies featuring practical spy action, international conspiracies, and realistic combat served as important references during planning. The intention was to remind audiences that Black Widow succeeds through intelligence, training, and determination instead of supernatural abilities. Filming officially began in 2019 across multiple countries and locations. Norway provided the setting for Natasha's isolated opening scenes, offering dramatic landscapes that emphasize her loneliness after the events of Captain America: Civil War. Budapest, a location frequently referenced throughout previous Marvel films, became an important production site because audiences had spent years wondering about the mysterious mission Natasha repeatedly mentioned alongside Clint Barton. While the film never fully recreates every event from that earlier mission, filming in Hungary helped strengthen continuity with previous Marvel stories. Additional production took place in England, where several large sound stages were constructed to recreate Red Room facilities, military installations, and numerous interior environments. Extensive work also occurred in Morocco, whose varied landscapes double for several international locations appearing throughout the story. The filmmakers carefully blended practical locations with digitally enhanced backgrounds to maintain the illusion of a worldwide espionage adventure. One of the most technically demanding aspects of production involved designing the Red Room. Rather than presenting it as a conventional underground bunker, the creative team imagined an enormous hidden airborne fortress floating high above the clouds. The visual effect department worked closely with production designers to create a facility that felt simultaneously futuristic, intimidating, and believable within the Marvel Universe. Numerous practical sets were built first, allowing actors to interact with physical environments before digital artists expanded the enormous structure during post-production. Action choreography represented another major area of preparation. Scarlett Johansson had already spent over 10 years training for Marvel films, making her one of the franchise's most experienced performers regarding stunt work. Even so, Black Widow required months of additional physical preparation because Natasha appears in nearly every major fight sequence. Johansson trained extensively in martial arts, weapons handling, tactical movement, and close-quarters combat, while working alongside professional stunt coordinators to ensure each fight remained consistent with Natasha's established fighting style. Florence Pugh also underwent intensive physical training before filming began. Although she had previously performed physically demanding roles, Black Widow required learning complex choreography involving hand-to-hand combat, firearms, wire work, and acrobatic movement. Pugh quickly impressed the stunt team through her commitment performing as much of the action herself as possible. Her willingness to participate in physically demanding scenes contributed greatly to Yelena's believable fighting style. Black Widow tells one of the most personal stories in the Marvel Cinematic Universe by shifting its focus away from world-ending threats and cosmic conflicts toward the emotional scars of a single hero. Rather than serving as a traditional origin story, the film explores Natasha Romanoff's past while she is already an experienced Avenger. Set shortly after the events of Captain America, Civil War, and before Avengers, Infinity War, the narrative fills one of the largest gaps in Natasha's life, revealing the family, trauma, and painful history that shaped the woman audiences had followed for more than a decade. The film follows a carefully constructed three-act structure while incorporating elements commonly found in classic espionage thrillers. Instead of relying solely on spectacular action, the screenplay gradually uncovers hidden truths about Natasha's past, allowing emotional revelations to carry as much weight as the physical battles. Every major action sequence also advances the story, ensuring that spectacle never overshadows character development. The opening immediately establishes the emotional foundation of the film. Rather than introducing Natasha as an adult superhero, the audience is transported back to 1995, where a seemingly ordinary suburban family lives quietly in Ohio. Young Natasha Romanoff lives alongside her younger sister Yelena, while Alexei Shostakov and Melina Vostokov appear to be loving parents. The peaceful domestic life creates a comforting illusion, encouraging viewers to believe they are witnessing a normal childhood. However, subtle clues suggest something is unusual beneath the surface. The illusion collapses dramatically when Alexei receives orders to end the undercover mission. The family hurriedly escapes the United States, fleeing authorities in a tense sequence that quickly transforms a peaceful beginning into a dangerous spy thriller. During the escape, audiences discover that the family was never real in the traditional sense. Alexei and Melina were Soviet operatives posing as parents, while Natasha and Yelena were children assigned to complete the deception. Despite the mission being artificial, genuine emotional bonds developed among them, establishing one of the central themes that drives the entire story. Following their escape, Natasha and Yelena are separated upon arriving in Russia. They are delivered to the Red Room, an organization responsible for abducting, training, and psychologically conditioning young girls into becoming elite assassins known as Black Widows. The haunting opening credits reinforce the horror of this institution by showing generations of girls transformed into weapons. This sequence functions as both exposition and emotional preparation, explaining the abuse that shaped Natasha's future without requiring lengthy dialogue later in the film. The narrative then jumps forward to the period after Captain America, Civil War. Natasha has violated the Sokovia Accords by helping Captain America and several Avengers escape government control. She now lives as a fugitive, isolated from both her former teammates and the authorities pursuing her. This choice places Natasha in a vulnerable emotional state before the main conflict begins. Unlike previous Marvel appearances where she operated within a team, she now faces her past completely alone. The inciting incident occurs when Natasha unexpectedly receives a mysterious package connected to Yelena. At the same time, Yelena has escaped the Red Room after being exposed to a chemical antidote that frees her from mind control. This antidote becomes one of the story's central plot devices because it introduces a possibility that other widows can also regain their free will. Rather than simply destroying the Red Room, the heroes now possess a means of saving its victims. Natasha's reunion with Yelena serves as the first major turning point. Their meeting begins not with an emotional embrace, but with an intense hand-to-hand fight inside a small apartment. Neither woman initially trusts the other, and years of emotional distance are expressed physically before words are exchanged. Once they recognize each other's true intentions, the sisters begin reconnecting while sharing painful memories of the lives stolen from them. Their conversations provide important exposition without slowing the pacing because the emotional tension remains constant. The first half of the film gradually shifts from survival to investigation. Natasha and Yelena discover that Dreykov, the leader of the Red Room whom Natasha believed dead, has secretly survived for years. Even more disturbing is the revelation that countless Black Widows continue operating around the world under complete psychological control. This discovery dramatically raises the stakes. Natasha realizes that her previous attempt to destroy the Red Room failed, meaning her greatest act of redemption remains incomplete. Seeking answers, Natasha and Yelena free Alexei from a remote Russian prison. The rescue sequence delivers one of the film's largest action set pieces, while simultaneously introducing humor through Alexei's larger-than-life personality. His exaggerated stories about past victories contrast sharply with Natasha's practical realism and Yelena's sarcastic attitude. Although the prison escape offers spectacular entertainment, it also begins rebuilding the fractured family dynamic established during the opening scenes. The story reaches its midpoint when the group visits Melina, who now lives in isolation while continuing scientific research connected to the Red Room. Here, the narrative deliberately slows to focus almost entirely on character interaction. The dinner table scene stands as one of the film's emotional highlights. What initially appears to be an ordinary family meal gradually transforms into a painful confrontation about abandonment, manipulation, regret, and lost childhoods. Each character views their shared past differently. Natasha dismisses the family as an assignment. Yelena insists the emotional memories were genuine. Alexei nostalgically remembers happier times. And Melina hides her guilt beneath emotional restraint. This conversation becomes the emotional center of the entire film. At first glance, Black Widow appears to be a straightforward action thriller filled with espionage, explosions, and spectacular combat sequences. However, beneath its fast-paced exterior lies one of the most emotionally layered films in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Unlike many superhero stories that focus primarily on saving the world, Black Widow explores deeply personal struggles involving identity, trauma, family, freedom, guilt, and redemption. These themes elevate the film beyond its action-driven narrative, allowing audiences to connect with Natasha Romanoff and the people around her on a profoundly human level. Every major relationship, location, and recurring visual element reinforces these deeper ideas, transforming the movie into an exploration of emotional survival rather than simply physical victory. Perhaps the most significant theme throughout the film is the search for identity. Natasha Romanoff has spent nearly her entire life pretending to be someone else. As a child, she participated in an undercover operation where even her family was part of a fabricated mission. Afterward, she entered the Red Room, where individuality was deliberately erased through harsh conditioning, manipulation, and psychological control. Even after escaping and becoming an Avenger, Natasha continued living under aliases, working as a spy whose profession required constant deception. As a result, one of her greatest struggles is understanding who she truly is beneath years of carefully constructed identities. This search for identity extends beyond Natasha. Yelena Belova experiences an even more direct crisis because she remained trapped inside the Red Room for years after Natasha escaped. Her memories, emotions, and decisions were manipulated by others, leaving her uncertain about which parts of her personality genuinely belonged to her. Throughout the film, Yelena gradually discovers that identity cannot be imposed by organizations or governments. Instead, it emerges through personal choices, emotional honesty, and meaningful relationships. By the conclusion of the story, both sisters begin defining themselves according to their own values rather than the roles assigned to them. Closely connected to identity is the theme of freedom. While many superhero films portray freedom as liberation from external enemies, Black Widow presents freedom primarily as psychological independence. The Red Room does not merely train assassins. It removes their ability to choose. Dreykov's organization controls every aspect of the Widow's existence, reducing human beings to obedient weapons. This loss of personal agency becomes one of the film's greatest horrors because it strips individuals of responsibility for their own lives. The antidote that frees the Widows therefore functions as far more than a scientific invention. Symbolically, it represents the restoration of free will. Every time the red chemical mist removes the mind control from another Widow, audiences witness a visual representation of someone reclaiming ownership over her own thoughts. The bright red cloud becomes a recurring symbol of liberation, replacing years of invisible psychological imprisonment with visible hope. Unlike many Marvel films where victory comes through defeating a powerful enemy, Black Widow suggests that true victory occurs when people regain the ability to make their own decisions. Trauma forms another central theme running throughout the entire narrative. Nearly every major character carries emotional wounds created by years of manipulation, violence, or regret. Natasha struggles with overwhelming guilt over the people she believes she failed to save. Yelena attempts to mask her pain with sarcasm and humor. Alexei hides disappointment beneath exaggerated stories about his former glory. Melina suppresses emotion through scientific detachment, convincing herself that logic is easier than confronting remorse. What makes Black Widow particularly effective is that it portrays trauma as something that affects people differently rather than following a single predictable pattern. Some characters become emotionally withdrawn. Others rely on comedy. Some seek redemption, while others attempt to bury painful memories entirely. The film never suggests that healing is simple or immediate. Instead, recovery begins when the characters stop pretending they are unaffected by their past and begin confronting those experiences together. The concept of family serves as the emotional heart of the movie. Black Widow repeatedly challenges conventional ideas about what family truly means. Natasha, Yelena, Alexei, and Melina were never biologically connected, and their childhood together originally existed only to complete a covert mission. Yet despite its artificial beginning, genuine emotional bonds develop between them. Years later, each character remembers that brief period differently, but none can completely dismiss the feelings they experienced. The dinner table sequence perfectly illustrates this theme. Natasha insists the family was never real because she believes accepting emotional attachment only increases future pain. Yelena passionately argues that the memories matter regardless of their original purpose. Alexei nostalgically recalls happier times, while Melina quietly struggles with guilt over abandoning the girls. The conversation reveals that emotional truth can exist even within deception. The family may have been created through lies, but the love, disappointment, resentment, and longing that develop were entirely authentic. This exploration of chosen family reflects one of the film's most meaningful messages. Throughout life, many people form deep emotional connections with individuals who are not related by blood. Black Widow argues that trust, loyalty, sacrifice, and shared experiences often define family more powerfully than biology alone. By the end of the film, the characters consciously choose one another rather than simply fulfilling assigned roles, transforming an artificial family into a genuine one. Redemption has always been one of Natasha Romanoff's defining motivations throughout the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and Black Widow expands this theme considerably. Natasha often speaks about the red in her ledger, referring to the terrible actions she committed while serving the Red Room. Although she has spent years attempting to make amends through heroism, she continues believing that some mistakes can never truly be erased. One of the defining qualities of Black Widow is its visual identity, which deliberately distinguishes itself from many other films in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. While the franchise is often associated with colorful cosmic adventures, futuristic technology, and large-scale superhero battles, Black Widow embraces a grounded espionage aesthetic inspired by classic spy thrillers. Director Kate Shortland and cinematographer Gabriel Beristain crafted a visual language that balances realistic action with emotional intimacy, allowing the film to feel both familiar within the Marvel Universe and unique as a standalone cinematic experience. Every lighting choice, camera movement, color palette, costume, location, and visual effect serves the story's deeper themes of identity, trauma, freedom, and family. From its opening moments, the film establishes a visual tone that immediately separates it from previous Marvel entries. The opening sequence set in suburban Ohio is intentionally warm and nostalgic. Soft natural lighting, bright afternoon skies, and comfortable suburban interiors create the illusion of an ordinary American family enjoying a peaceful life. The camera often frames Natasha, Yelena, Alexei, and Melina together within balanced compositions, reinforcing the image of a stable household. These early scenes evoke childhood innocence and security, encouraging the audience to believe in the family's happiness before revealing that everything is part of an elaborate undercover operation. When the family's escape begins, the cinematography changes dramatically. The camera becomes more kinetic, frequently using handheld movement and tighter framing to create urgency and instability. The warm colors of suburban America give way to colder blue and gray tones as the characters flee toward their aircraft. This sudden visual transformation mirrors the emotional shock experienced by Natasha and Yelena as their seemingly perfect childhood collapses within minutes. The contrast between these two visual styles immediately establishes one of the film's central ideas. Appearances can be deceptive, and beneath comforting illusions often lies painful truth. Perhaps the most striking visual sequence arrives during the opening title montage. Instead of the energetic, colorful introductions common throughout the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Black Widow presents a haunting collection of images depicting young girls being recruited, transported, and transformed into Black Widows. Slow motion photography, muted colors, rapid editing, archival-style imagery, and symbolic visual compositions combine to create an atmosphere of emotional unease. The accompanying music intensifies the disturbing imagery without relying on graphic violence. This sequence communicates the psychological horror of the Red Room through visual storytelling rather than explicit exposition, making it one of the most memorable openings in the entire franchise. Throughout the film, the color palette plays a crucial narrative role. Much of Black Widow favors restrained tones rather than the vibrant comic book colors often associated with superhero cinema. Gray, white, black, dark blue, and muted green dominate many environments, reflecting Natasha's emotionally isolated world. These subdued colors create a realistic atmosphere appropriate for international espionage, while emphasizing the emotional weight carried by the characters. The snowy landscapes that appear throughout large portions of the story deserve particular attention. Snow serves multiple visual purposes. On a practical level, it creates beautiful high-contrast environments for action scenes. White landscapes allow characters dressed in darker clothing to stand out clearly, while simultaneously providing opportunities for camouflage when Natasha later wears her white tactical suit. Symbolically, snow represents emotional isolation, silence, and the possibility of renewal. Much like untouched snow can cover scars beneath its surface, Natasha has spent years burying painful memories beneath emotional control. As the story progresses, those hidden experiences gradually emerge into the open. Natasha's white tactical suit became one of the film's most recognizable visual elements. Previous Marvel appearances consistently featured Natasha wearing black uniforms associated with secrecy, espionage, and covert operations. The white suit introduces a subtle but meaningful shift in visual symbolism. While it functions effectively as camouflage within snowy environments, it also suggests purification and emotional transformation. Natasha is no longer hiding exclusively within darkness. She has begun confronting her past directly, and the lighter costume reflects this internal change without abandoning the practical realism expected from an elite spy. Lighting throughout the film constantly reinforces emotional tone. Interior scenes involving the Red Room frequently employ low-key lighting, deep shadows, and harsh directional illumination. Faces are often partially hidden within darkness, visually representing secrecy, manipulation, and concealed identities. Dreykov's headquarters uses cold metallic lighting that creates an emotionally sterile environment where human beings are treated as disposable assets rather than individuals. By contrast, scenes involving Natasha's reconstructed family often feature softer lighting despite occurring in bleak locations. During the dinner table sequence, warm interior illumination gently contrasts with the cold exterior environment. Although unresolved conflict dominates the conversation, the lighting subtly reminds audiences that genuine affection still exists beneath years of resentment. This careful balance between warmth and tension reflects the complicated emotional relationships shared by the characters. Camera composition also supports the story's emotional development. Early scenes frequently isolate Natasha within the frame, emphasizing her loneliness following the events of Captain America: Civil War. Wide shots place her against enormous landscapes, reinforcing the idea that she has become disconnected from both her past and her former teammates. As the narrative progresses and Natasha reconnects with Yelena, Alexei, and Melina, the cinematography increasingly places multiple characters within shared frames. Group compositions visually communicate the gradual rebuilding of emotional connections before the dialogue explicitly confirms this transformation. While Black Widow is often remembered for its thrilling action sequences and emotionally driven story, one of its most overlooked strengths is its exceptional use of music and sound. Every aspect of the film's audio design, from its haunting opening sequence to its explosive action scenes, was carefully crafted to reinforce the emotional journey of Natasha Romanoff and the themes of identity, family, trauma, and redemption. Rather than overwhelming the audience with constant orchestral spectacle, the filmmakers used silence, subtle musical motifs, realistic sound effects, and carefully placed songs to create an atmosphere that feels far more intimate than many previous Marvel Cinematic Universe films. The musical score was composed by Lorne Balfe, an experienced composer known for blending traditional orchestral writing with modern electronic elements. Before Black Widow, Balfe had already established himself through work on numerous high-profile productions across film, television, and video games. His style often combines emotional melodies with rhythmic percussion, creating music capable of supporting both personal drama and large-scale action. For Black Widow, Balfe intentionally avoided creating an overly heroic soundtrack. Instead, he focused on Natasha's emotional state, allowing quieter moments to become just as musically important as the film's biggest action sequences. Unlike many superhero scores that immediately introduce bold, heroic themes, Black Widow begins with music designed to unsettle the audience. The opening title sequence features one of the most memorable musical moments in the entire Marvel Cinematic Universe. A haunting cover version of "Smells Like Teen Spirit" accompanies disturbing images of young girls being taken into the Red Room and transformed into assassins. The original song, famous for its explosive energy and rebellious spirit, is transformed into something slow, fragile, and deeply unsettling. This dramatic reinterpretation completely changes the emotional meaning of the music. Instead of celebrating youthful freedom, the slowed arrangement emphasizes innocence being stolen. Soft vocals combined with sparse instrumentation create an atmosphere of sadness rather than anger. As images of children being manipulated fill the screen, the music becomes almost hypnotic, forcing viewers to focus on the emotional tragedy unfolding before them. The sequence immediately signals that Black Widow intends to explore darker psychological territory than audiences might expect from a traditional superhero adventure. Many critics later praise this opening as one of the strongest and most artistically daring introductions in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Throughout the film, Balfe's score avoids overwhelming the dialogue. During emotional conversations, particularly between Natasha and Yelena, the music often becomes almost invisible. Gentle strings, soft piano notes, and restrained electronic textures quietly support the performances without distracting from the actors. This minimalist approach allows silence to become one of the soundtrack's most powerful tools. Instead of filling every emotional pause with dramatic orchestration, the filmmakers frequently allow quiet moments to breathe naturally, making the characters' words and facial expressions carry greater emotional weight. Natasha's musical identity throughout the score reflects her personality. Rather than receiving a triumphant superhero anthem filled with brass fanfares and soaring melodies, her themes are generally restrained, thoughtful, and emotionally layered. Slow string passages frequently accompany moments of reflection, reminding audiences that Natasha's greatest battles are internal rather than physical. Even during action scenes, the music rarely portrays her as invincible. Instead, the score emphasizes determination, resilience, and survival. Yelena Belova receives a musical treatment that subtly contrasts Natasha's. While both characters share similar emotional histories, Yelena's themes often contain lighter melodic ideas beneath the underlying sadness. This reflects her personality, which balances trauma with humor and optimism. Florence Pugh's performance frequently shifts between sarcastic comedy and heartbreaking vulnerability, and the music follows these emotional transitions carefully. As Yelena reconnects with Natasha throughout the story, their musical ideas gradually become more closely connected, symbolizing the rebuilding of their sisterly bond. The relationship between music and family forms one of the film's strongest emotional foundations. During scenes involving Alexei, Melina, Natasha, and Yelena together, Balfe introduces warmer orchestral textures than those heard during Natasha's solitary moments. Although tension often dominates these interactions, subtle harmony suggests that genuine affection still exists beneath years of separation and disappointment. The dinner table sequence demonstrates this particularly well. Rather than using dramatic orchestration to force emotion upon the audience, the score remains understated, allowing uncomfortable silence, hesitant dialogue, and restrained performances to create emotional authenticity. Action scenes receive significantly different musical treatment. During combat, the soundtrack combines aggressive percussion, electronic rhythms, deep brass, and fast string passages to create momentum without becoming chaotic. Unlike some modern action scores that rely almost entirely on loud volume, Black Widow carefully varies musical intensity throughout each sequence. Moments of explosive action alternate with quieter passages, allowing audiences to appreciate changes in pacing rather than experiencing constant sensory overload. The prison escape sequence serves as an excellent example of this dynamic approach. When Black Widow was finally released in July 2021, it arrived carrying enormous expectations. Fans had waited more than a decade for Natasha Romanoff to receive her own standalone film, and the movie also became the first theatrical release in the Marvel Cinematic Universe following Avengers: Endgame. Because of its long development, repeated delays, and unique release strategy during the COVID-19 pandemic, the film immediately became one of the most discussed movies of the year. Critics, longtime Marvel fans, casual audiences, and industry analysts all examined the film from different perspectives, making its reception one of the most complex in the history of the franchise. professional critics generally responded positively to Black Widow. Many praised the film for delivering a more grounded and emotionally driven story compared to some of Marvel's larger cosmic adventures. Reviewers frequently highlighted the movie's emphasis on character relationships, particularly the bond between Natasha Romanoff and Yelena Belova. Rather than focusing entirely on saving the world, the film explored themes of family, trauma, and redemption, giving audiences a more intimate experience than many previous Marvel productions. Scarlett Johansson's performance received widespread acclaim. After portraying Natasha Romanoff for more than 10 years across numerous Marvel films, critics agreed that Johansson successfully carried the emotional weight of the story. Many reviews noted that her portrayal balanced confidence, vulnerability, guilt, and determination in a way that made Natasha feel more human than ever before. Instead of presenting her as an unstoppable action hero, the film explored the emotional consequences of her past, allowing Johansson to deliver one of her most nuanced performances within the Marvel Cinematic Universe. However, if one performer consistently attracted extraordinary praise, it was Florence Pugh. Critics almost universally celebrated her portrayal of Yelena Belova, describing her as charismatic, funny, emotionally authentic, and instantly memorable. Many reviewers considered Yelena the breakout character of the film, praising her ability to alternate naturally between humor and heartbreaking vulnerability. Her playful teasing of Natasha, combined with genuine emotional depth, created one of Marvel's strongest character introductions in recent years. The chemistry between Johansson and Pugh became one of the movie's greatest strengths, according to both critics and audiences. Their relationship felt believable because it evolved naturally from distrust and resentment toward mutual understanding and affection. Many reviewers argued that the emotional scenes shared by the two actresses were significantly more compelling than the larger action sequences, demonstrating that the film succeeded primarily because of its character-driven storytelling. David Harbour also received considerable praise for his performance as Alexei Shostakov, the Red Guardian. Critics appreciated his ability to provide comic relief without reducing the character to a simple joke. Beneath Alexei's exaggerated stories about his heroic past lay genuine regret and loneliness, and Harbour balanced these emotional layers with surprising effectiveness. Many audiences enjoyed watching him interact with the rest of the family, especially during the memorable dinner table sequence that revealed the complicated dynamics between the four central characters. Rachel Weisz's performance as Melina Vostokov earned positive responses as well. Critics admired her restrained portrayal of a woman whose intelligence and emotional distance concealed years of guilt. Although Melina received less screen time than Natasha or Yelena, reviewers often commented that Weisz added complexity to a role that could easily become a stereotypical supporting character. Her quiet performance contributed significantly to the film's exploration of broken family relationships and moral ambiguity. Director Kate Shortland's work was also widely praised. Critics recognized her decision to approach Black Widow less as a traditional superhero film and more as a spy thriller centered on emotional healing. Her emphasis on character interactions, quieter dramatic moments, and psychological trauma distinguished the movie from many previous entries in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Several reviewers appreciated that Shortland allowed conversations and performances to remain at the center of the narrative rather than relying exclusively on nonstop action. The film's opening sequence received particularly enthusiastic acclaim. Many critics described the haunting montage showing the recruitment and conditioning of young girls into the Red Room as one of the most powerful openings ever produced by Marvel Studios. Combined with a slowed version of Smells Like Teen Spirit, the sequence established a surprisingly dark and emotionally serious tone. Reviewers frequently cited these opening minutes as evidence that Black Widow was willing to explore more mature themes than audiences might have expected. The action scenes also received generally positive reviews. Critics praised the practical stunt work, grounded fight choreography, and realistic espionage atmosphere that differentiated the film from superhero stories involving cosmic powers or magical abilities. The apartment fight between Natasha and Yelena, the prison escape, and several hand-to-hand combat sequences were frequently mentioned as highlights because they emphasized physical skill rather than overwhelming visual effects. Although Black Widow was released later than many fans had hoped, its long-term legacy has steadily grown within both the Marvel Cinematic Universe and the broader superhero genre. What initially appeared to be a delayed standalone adventure has evolved into an important chapter in Marvel's larger narrative, serving as both a farewell to Natasha Romanoff and an introduction to the next generation of characters. Beyond its place in Marvel continuity, the film influenced conversations about female-led action movies, grounded superhero storytelling, franchise succession, and the future direction of blockbuster cinema. Its impact extends far beyond its original theatrical release, continuing to shape audiences, filmmakers, and the entertainment industry. One of the film's most significant contributions was completing Natasha Romanoff's character arc. Before Black Widow, audiences knew relatively little about Natasha's childhood despite following her through numerous Marvel films. References to the Red Room, Budapest, and the red in her ledger had become recurring mysteries throughout the franchise. While viewers understood that Natasha carried deep emotional scars, much of her past remained intentionally vague. Black Widow finally provided the missing context that allowed audiences to fully understand experiences that transformed her into one of Earth's greatest heroes. The film fundamentally changed how many fans viewed Natasha's appearances in earlier Marvel productions. After learning about her upbringing, her relationship with Yelena, her false family, and the psychological abuse she endured in the Red Room, scenes from films such as The Avengers, Captain America, The Winter Soldier, Captain America, Civil War, Avengers, Infinity War, and Avengers, Endgame gained additional emotional meaning. Moments that once appeared to be simple dialogue or brief references suddenly carried much greater emotional weight, because audiences now understood the memories and guilt Natasha had been carrying for years. Perhaps the film's greatest legacy within the Marvel Cinematic Universe was introducing Yelena Belova. Florence Pugh's performance immediately resonated with audiences, making Yelena one of Marvel's most successful new characters in recent years. Rather than simply replacing Natasha, Yelena established her own identity through humor, emotional honesty, and a different perspective on their shared history. Her sarcastic personality contrasted naturally with Natasha's quieter emotional restraint, creating a dynamic that audiences quickly embraced. Marvel clearly positioned Yelena as an important figure for future storytelling. Following Black Widow, she continued appearing in subsequent Marvel projects, expanding her role within the growing interconnected universe. This successful introduction demonstrated Marvel's increasing focus on passing heroic legacies from original Avengers to newer generations without simply repeating previous character arcs. Instead of copying Natasha's personality, Yelena inherited her spirit while maintaining a completely distinct voice. The concept of legacy itself becomes one of the film's central achievements. Natasha's greatest accomplishment is ultimately not defeating Dreykov alone, but freeing countless widows from lives of manipulation and oppression. In doing so, she leaves behind something far more meaningful than physical victories. She creates opportunities for others to live freely, make independent choices, and determine their own futures. This emphasis on inspiring future generations rather than seeking personal glory reflects one of the defining characteristics of truly enduring heroes. Black Widow also reinforced the growing importance of grounded superhero storytelling. During an era dominated by increasingly cosmic narratives involving multiverses, magical dimensions, and universe-threatening villains, the film demonstrated that audiences remain deeply invested in stories centered on human emotion. Natasha possesses no supernatural abilities, yet her struggles often feel more relatable than those of characters with extraordinary powers. The film proved that emotional authenticity could be just as compelling as large-scale visual spectacle. This influence can be seen in the continued popularity of superhero stories that emphasize espionage, political tension, personal relationships, and psychological conflict. Rather than relying exclusively on increasingly powerful villains or larger action sequences, many later productions recognize the value of returning to smaller, character-focused narratives. Black Widow reminded both Marvel and the wider film industry that audiences care most about characters when they feel emotionally believable. The film also strengthened the position of women within blockbuster action cinema. While female-led action films certainly existed long before Black Widow, the movie arrived during a period when Hollywood was actively expanding opportunities for women both in front of and behind the camera. Director Kate Shortland brought perspective that prioritized emotional complexity alongside physical action, demonstrating that blockbuster filmmaking could successfully combine intimate drama with spectacular entertainment. The success of Black Widow further reinforced the commercial viability of female-centered action franchises. Rather than presenting Natasha as an exception, the film contributed to an industry trend recognizing that audiences enthusiastically support women leading major studio productions. This shift encouraged studios to continue investing in projects featuring complex female protagonists across multiple genres, rather than limiting such opportunities. Florence Pugh's Yelena also became an important cultural influence among younger audiences. Her combination of emotional vulnerability, confidence, humor, and resilience offered a different model of heroism than many traditional action protagonists. Instead of presenting emotional openness as weakness, the character openly acknowledges trauma while continuing to move forward. This balance between strength and vulnerability resonated with viewers who appreciated heroes capable of expressing genuine emotion without sacrificing competence. One of the reasons Black Widow has remained an important film within the Marvel Cinematic Universe is the way different audiences interpreted its story. Unlike many superhero films that focus primarily on spectacular battles and larger-than-life villains, Black Widow encouraged viewers to connect emotionally with its characters. People did not simply watch Natasha Romanoff fight another enemy. They witnessed someone confronting years of trauma, guilt, broken relationships, and unanswered questions. As a result, audiences from different generations, backgrounds, and life experiences often found different meanings within the same story. For longtime Marvel fans, Black Widow represented something they had wanted for more than a decade. Since Natasha Romanoff first appeared in Iron Man 2 in 2010, viewers had followed her journey across numerous Marvel films without ever seeing her complete personal story. Fans had watched her evolve from a mysterious spy into one of the founding Avengers, yet much of her past remained hidden behind brief references to Budapest, the Red Room, and the red in her ledger. Black Widow finally answered many of those questions, giving audiences a greater understanding of the sacrifices and emotional burdens that had shaped one of Marvel's most respected heroes. Many viewers described the experience as bittersweet. On one hand, audiences appreciated finally receiving Natasha's solo adventure after years of anticipation. On the other hand, everyone already knew that Natasha would eventually sacrifice herself during Avengers Endgame. Because of this, the film carried a unique emotional atmosphere. Rather than wondering whether Natasha would survive, viewers focused on understanding her emotional journey. Many fans felt that every smile, every conversation with Yelena, and every quiet moment carried greater significance because they knew Natasha's future had already been written. A common reaction among audiences involved a sense of regret that the film had not been released earlier in the Marvel timeline. Countless viewers believed Natasha to deserve her own movie before Avengers Endgame, allowing audiences to fully appreciate her story before witnessing her sacrifice. Many fans argued that had Black Widow premiered several years earlier, Natasha's final moments in Endgame would become even more emotionally devastating. While this criticism remained widespread, it also reflected how deeply audiences cared about the character rather than dissatisfaction with the film itself. One of the most universally praised aspects of the movie was the relationship between Natasha and Yelena Belova. Viewers repeatedly commented that their conversations felt genuine because they resembled real siblings rather than fictional superheroes. They argued, laughed, mocked one another, shared painful memories, and gradually rebuilt trust through honesty rather than dramatic speeches. Audiences appreciated that their relationship developed naturally instead of relying on artificial emotional moments designed solely to generate tears. Yelena quickly became one of the film's most beloved characters. Younger audiences, in particular, connected strongly with her personality. Her sarcastic humor, playful confidence, and willingness to openly discuss emotional pain made her feel refreshingly authentic. Unlike many action heroes who hide vulnerability behind constant confidence, Yelena openly acknowledged the lasting effects of her childhood trauma while refusing to allow it to define her future. Many viewers admired this balance between emotional honesty and personal strength. The famous scene in which Yelena humorously imitates Natasha's superhero landing became one of the movie's most memorable moments. Audiences embraced the joke because it gently acknowledged a long-standing superhero pose that had appeared throughout numerous Marvel films. Social media quickly filled with memes, videos, artwork, and humorous discussions referencing the scene. More importantly, The joke highlighted Yelena's ability to bring warmth and humor into a story that often dealt with painful subject matter. Fans frequently cited this sequence as an example of Marvel successfully balancing comedy with emotional storytelling. Many viewers also found themselves reflecting on the idea of family after watching the film. Natasha, Yelena, Alexei, and Melina were never truly a biological family, yet their emotional connections proved stronger than many traditional family relationships. This concept resonated with audiences from a wide variety of backgrounds. Adopted individuals, members of blended families, and people who had formed close emotional bonds outside their biological relatives often expressed appreciation for the film's message that family is defined by love, loyalty, and shared experiences rather than genetics alone. The dinner table scene generated particularly strong emotional responses. Rather than presenting a perfect family reunion, the conversation exposed years of resentment, disappointment, guilt, and unresolved pain. Many viewers described this sequence as one of the most realistic emotional moments ever portrayed within the Marvel Cinematic Universe. The characters interrupted one another, disagreed, became defensive, apologized imperfectly, and struggled to express complicated feelings. Audiences recognized elements of their own family relationships within these interactions, making the scene surprisingly relatable despite its espionage setting. Older audiences often connected most strongly with Natasha's search for redemption. Many interpret her story as one about accepting responsibility for past mistakes while continuing to move forward. Natasha understands she cannot erase the suffering she experienced or the actions she was forced to commit, yet she refuses to surrender to guilt. Instead, she dedicates herself to protecting others from enduring similar experiences. Viewers who had overcome difficult chapters in their own lives frequently describe Natasha's journey as inspiring because it emphasized growth rather than perfection. The film's exploration of trauma also resonated deeply with many audiences. One of the greatest strengths of Black Widow is its emphasis on character development. While many superhero films prioritize large-scale action and external conflict, this story focuses primarily on emotional growth of its central characters. Every major figure enters a film carrying emotional baggage created by years of deception, guilt, trauma, or regret. Rather than presenting heroes and villains as simple opposites, the narrative explores how past experiences shape identity, relationships, and personal choices. By the end of the film, nearly every major character has undergone meaningful transformation, making Black Widow one of the most character-driven entries in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. At the center of the story is Natasha Romanoff, whose emotional journey represents the culmination of everything audiences had learned about her throughout more than a decade of Marvel films. Natasha has always been portrayed as someone haunted by her past. She frequently referred to the red in her ledger, suggesting that before becoming an Avenger, she had committed terrible acts while working as an assassin for the Red Room. Previous films hinted at her desire for redemption, but Black Widow finally reveals the emotional origins of that guilt. At the beginning of the film, Natasha is emotionally isolated. Following the events of Captain America, Civil War, she has become a fugitive, separated from the Avengers, and constantly moving from one safe house to another. Although she projects confidence and control, she has buried much of her emotional pain beneath years of discipline and professionalism. Natasha prefers solving problems through action because confronting her feelings requires revisiting memories she has spent years trying to suppress. Her reunion with Yelena forces her to confront those memories directly. Initially, Natasha dismisses her childhood family as nothing more than an undercover assignment. She insists that the emotional connections they experienced were artificial because acknowledging their authenticity would require admitting how deeply she still misses them. Throughout the story, however, Natasha gradually recognizes that although the mission itself was fake, the love she felt for Yelena, Alexei, and Melina was entirely real. Natasha's greatest internal conflict revolves around guilt. She believes she failed to destroy the Red Room years earlier and carries responsibility for every widow who remained trapped afterward. She also believes she caused the death of Dreykov's daughter during her earlier assassination attempt. These regrets have defined her understanding of herself for years. Instead of viewing herself as a hero, Natasha continues seeing someone whose mistakes can never truly be forgiven. As the story progresses, Natasha begins redefining redemption. Rather than attempting to erase her past, she accepts that healing requires confronting it honestly. She returns to the Red Room not because she believes she deserves forgiveness, but because she refuses to allow others to continue suffering. By freeing the widows and rescuing Antonia, Natasha demonstrates that redemption is achieved through present choices rather than endless self-punishment. Her emotional journey concludes not with complete peace, but with greater acceptance of who she has become. Yelena Belova experiences perhaps the most dramatic transformation in the film. Unlike Natasha, who escaped the Red Room years earlier, Yelena spent much longer living under its control. She enters the story recently freed from mind control, but emotionally uncertain about her own identity. Much of her life has been dictated by others, leaving her unsure which thoughts, emotions, and memories genuinely belong to her. Despite this painful background, Yelena initially presents herself with confidence and humor. She frequently jokes with Natasha, mocks superhero poses, and approaches dangerous situations with surprising optimism. However, these lighter moments often conceal profound emotional wounds. Yelena desperately wants Natasha to acknowledge that the family they once shared was real. For Yelena, those childhood memories represent the only period in which she experienced genuine love before returning to years of abuse within the Red Room. Her relationship with Natasha gradually evolves from resentment to reconciliation. Early conversations reveal years of disappointment because Yelena believes Natasha abandoned her without ever looking back. Natasha, meanwhile, believes leaving was the only way to survive. As they honestly discuss their experiences, both sisters begin understanding each other's pain rather than judging one another's decisions. Their emotional reconciliation becomes the heart of the entire film. By the conclusion, Yelena has transformed from someone seeking answers into someone prepared to create her own future. She no longer defines herself solely as a former widow or a victim of the Red Room. Instead, she emerges as an independent hero capable of carrying Natasha's legacy while remaining entirely her own person. This development explains why audiences embrace Yelena so quickly as one of Marvel's most promising new characters. Alexei Shostakov, also known as the Red Guardian, undergoes a subtler but equally meaningful transformation. At first, Alexei appears almost entirely comedic. He constantly tells exaggerated stories about his past achievements, boasts about imaginary victories, and reminisces about the days when he served as the Soviet Union's greatest superhero. Beneath this humor, however, lies a deeply insecure man struggling to accept that his greatest accomplishments belong to the past. One of the most impressive aspects of Black Widow is how its costume and set design quietly support the film's emotional storytelling. While audiences often focus on the action sequences and dramatic character moments, nearly every location, costume, prop, and piece of production design serves a deeper narrative purpose. Unlike many superhero films that embrace highly stylized fantasy environments, Black Widow adopts a grounded visual approach inspired by espionage thrillers. The costumes emphasize practicality over spectacle, while the sets reflect the psychological state of the characters and the oppressive world created by the Red Room. Together, these visual elements strengthen the film's themes of identity, family, freedom, and redemption. The costume design was led by Janie Temim, an experienced designer known for creating memorable wardrobes across numerous major film productions. Rather than treating costumes as simple superhero uniforms, Temim approached each character by considering personality, history, occupation, emotional state, and cultural background. Every major costume reflects who the character is at that point in the story, allowing clothing to become another form of visual storytelling. Natasha Romanoff's wardrobe represents the clearest example of this philosophy. Throughout most previous Marvel films, Natasha wore variations of her iconic black tactical suit. Black had become closely associated with her identity as an elite spy and former assassin. The color symbolized secrecy, professionalism, danger, and emotional restraint. In Black Widow, however, Natasha spends much of the film wearing an entirely new white tactical suit, one of the most recognizable costume changes in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. From a practical perspective, the white uniform functions perfectly within the snowy environments featured during the film's final act. It provides camouflage during outdoor operations and reinforces the grounded military realism of Natasha's missions. However, the color choice carries much deeper symbolic meaning. White traditionally represents purification, renewal, forgiveness, and new beginnings. Natasha's decision to wear white during her confrontation with the Red Room reflects her emotional journey toward confronting rather than hiding from her past. Although she cannot erase the darkness of her earlier life, the lighter costume visually suggests that she is no longer defined entirely by guilt. Despite changing colors, Natasha's suit remains practical rather than decorative. Unlike costumes designed purely for visual spectacle, every element appears functional. Reinforced armor panels, tactical belts, protective gloves, combat boots, utility pockets, and lightweight materials all support the idea that Natasha relies on preparation and skill rather than superhuman abilities. The absence of unnecessary decoration reinforces her identity as an experienced operative who values efficiency above appearance. Yelena Belova's costume design deliberately distinguishes her from Natasha while maintaining clear similarities between the two sisters. Like Natasha, Yelena wears tactical clothing designed for combat and covert operations. However, her uniforms include additional pockets, heavier equipment, and slightly bulkier silhouettes, reflecting her more direct and aggressive fighting style. One of the film's funniest recurring jokes involves Yelena proudly explaining the usefulness of multiple pockets, playfully criticizing Natasha's more streamlined costume. While humorous, this conversation also highlights differences in personality. Yelena values practicality and openly expresses her opinions, whereas Natasha often favors simplicity and emotional restraint. Yelena's costumes also communicate her evolving independence. Although trained within the same Red Room program as Natasha, her clothing gradually becomes less uniform and more individual as the story progresses. This subtle visual evolution mirrors her emotional journey toward reclaiming her personal identity after years of psychological conditioning. David Harbour's Red Guardian costume provides another fascinating example of character-driven design. Unlike Captain America's polished and heroic appearance, Alexei Shostakov's uniform appears worn, faded, and slightly outdated. The suit reflects decades of neglect while preserving reminders of his former glory. Scratches, weathering, and faded colors visually communicate that Alexei's greatest achievements belong to the past. Even before he speaks, audiences understand that this once proud hero has struggled for many years. The oversized appearance of the costume also complements Harbour's physical performance. Alexei no longer possesses the athletic build associated with his younger days, making the suit appear slightly uncomfortable. Rather than diminishing the character, this design reinforces his humanity. Alexei desperately wants to relive his heroic past, but the costume constantly reminds both him and the audience that time has changed him. The uniform becomes a visual representation of nostalgia, regret, and the hope for redemption. Rachel Weisz's Melina Vostokov dresses very differently from the other central characters. As a scientist and strategist, Melina rarely wears elaborate combat gear during her first appearances. Instead, her wardrobe consists primarily of practical clothing suited to research and daily work. Neutral colors, simple designs, and understated fabrics emphasize intelligence rather than physical intimidation. Her clothing reflects someone who values precision, control, and emotional restraint. When Melina later participates more directly in the mission against the Red Room, subtle changes in her wardrobe reflect her renewed commitment to protecting Natasha and Yelena. Although her appearance remains practical, audiences recognize that she has shifted from passive observer to active participant in confronting her past. Taskmaster's costume represents one of the film's most visually striking designs. Heavy armor, a concealed helmet, tactical weaponry, and layered protective equipment combine to create an intimidating silhouette. Unlike Natasha or Yelena, whose faces remain visible throughout most action scenes, Taskmaster's hidden identity emphasizes emotional detachment and complete loss of individuality. The armor transforms Antonia Dreykov into what appears to be an unstoppable machine rather than a human being. One of the defining qualities of Black Widow is the strength of its screenplay. While the Marvel Cinematic Universe is known for balancing action, humor, and emotional storytelling, Black Widow distinguishes itself by placing character relationships at the center of nearly every scene. Rather than relying solely on spectacular battles or constant plot twists, the screenplay focuses on conversations that gradually reveal years of hidden pain, guilt, resentment, and affection. Every major dialogue exchange contributes either to character development, thematic exploration, or narrative progression, making the script one of the most emotionally grounded in the franchise. The screenplay was written by Eric Pearson, based on a story developed alongside Jack Schaefer and Ned Benson. The writers faced a particularly difficult challenge because Natasha Romanoff was already one of the Marvel Cinematic Universe's longest-running characters. Audiences had known her for more than 10 years, meaning the film could not function as a traditional origin story. Instead, the screenplay had to deepen an already familiar character while fitting naturally into the existing Marvel timeline. Rather than rewriting Natasha's history, the writers expanded upon previously established details, giving emotional meaning to references that had appeared throughout earlier films. One of the screenplay's greatest achievements is its ability to blend multiple genres without losing focus. Black Widow functions simultaneously as a spy thriller, family drama, psychological character study, and superhero adventure. Many films attempting to combine so many different tones struggle to maintain consistency. Here, however, the dialogue serves as the element that unifies these various styles. Whether characters are exchanging tactical information during dangerous missions or discussing painful childhood memories around a dinner table, the conversations always feel connected to the larger emotional journey. Natasha Romanoff's dialogue reflects her personality perfectly. Throughout the film, she rarely speaks more than necessary. Years of espionage have taught her to observe before reacting, making her words carefully measured and emotionally restrained. Scarlett Johansson delivers many lines with quiet confidence rather than dramatic intensity, reinforcing Natasha's tendency to suppress personal feelings. Even during emotionally charged moments, Natasha often avoids lengthy speeches, allowing silence and facial expressions to communicate emotions that words cannot fully express. This restrained dialogue becomes particularly effective because audiences already understand Natasha's history from previous Marvel films. The screenplay trusts viewers to recognize emotional subtext rather than explaining every feeling directly. When Natasha briefly refers to past mistakes or expresses concern for Yelena, the emotional weight comes from what remains unsaid as much as from the actual words spoken. This subtle approach demonstrates confidence in both the audience and the performers. In contrast, Yelena Belova's dialogue is energetic, spontaneous, and emotionally transparent. Florence Pugh's character frequently interrupts conversations with jokes, sarcastic observations, or unexpected honesty. Unlike Natasha, Yelena openly expresses frustration, disappointment, affection, and humor without carefully filtering every thought. This difference creates a natural contrast between the sisters, making their conversations dynamic and unpredictable. Perhaps the most famous example occurs when Yelena playfully mocks Natasha's iconic superhero landing pose. The scene quickly became one of the film's most memorable moments because it combines humor with character development. On the surface, Yelena is teasing Natasha about an exaggerated action pose. Beneath the comedy, however, the conversation reveals the comfortable familiarity shared by two sisters who know exactly how to challenge one another. The joke works because it feels like something real siblings would genuinely say rather than dialogue written solely to entertain the audience. Humor throughout Black Widow is handled with remarkable restraint. Unlike some Marvel films where jokes occasionally interrupt emotional scenes, the comedy here usually grows naturally from personality rather than circumstance. Alexei's exaggerated stories about his heroic past, Yelena's sarcastic comments, and Natasha's subtle reactions all emerge from established character traits. As a result, the humor enhances rather than weakens the emotional authenticity of the narrative. David Harbour's Alexei receives some of the screenplay's funniest dialogue, yet his conversations also reveal profound emotional insecurity. He constantly reminisces about his former glory, exaggerating stories about battles and achievements that may never have happened exactly as described. Initially, these stories appear purely comedic. Gradually, however, audiences recognize that Alexei uses humor and nostalgia to avoid confronting his own failures as a father and hero. The screenplay carefully balances comedy with vulnerability, allowing laughter to coexist with genuine sadness. Rachel Weisz's Melina speaks very differently from the rest of the family. Her dialogue is precise, analytical, and emotionally controlled. As a scientist who has spent years suppressing guilt, Melina rarely communicates through emotional language. Instead, she often focuses on practical details or intellectual observations. Yet beneath her calm exterior, subtle changes in tone reveal growing affection and regret. The screenplay wisely avoids giving Yelena dramatic emotional monologues, allowing her restraint to become one of her defining characteristics. The dinner table scene represents the screenplay at its absolute best. Lasting several minutes without major action, the sequence demonstrates how dialogue alone can generate extraordinary dramatic tension. Every character enters a conversation, carrying years of unresolved emotional conflict. Natasha insists that the family was never real. Yelena passionately argues that the emotional memories matter regardless of the original mission. Alexei desperately attempts to recreate happier times, while Yelena quietly avoids discussing her own responsibility. The brilliance of this scene lies in its realism. The marketing campaign for Black Widow was one of the most unusual and challenging promotional efforts ever undertaken by Marvel Studios. Unlike previous Marvel Cinematic Universe films, which generally follow predictable promotional schedules leading to theatrical release, Black Widow faced repeated delays because of the global COVID-19 pandemic. As a result, the marketing strategy had to be redesigned several times over the course of more than a year. Rather than launching a single campaign, Marvel and Disney were forced to repeatedly adjust trailers, advertising, merchandise, interviews, and promotional events while maintaining excitement for a film that audiences had already been anticipating for more than a decade. From the moment Marvel officially announced the project, fan anticipation reached extraordinary levels. Natasha Romanoff had first appeared in Iron Man 2 in 2010, and for years audiences had requested a solo adventure dedicated entirely to her character. Every major Marvel convention, interview, and fan event included questions about whether Black Widow would finally receive her own film. This long period of anticipation became one of the campaign's greatest strengths. By the time the first promotional materials appeared, the movie already possessed enormous public recognition, without requiring audiences to learn about a completely new superhero. Marvel officially revealed the film during one of its major presentations, announcing the next phase of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. The announcement generated worldwide media coverage, with entertainment websites, news organizations, and social media immediately discussing Natasha Romanoff's long-awaited solo debut. Simply confirming that the film was finally happening became one of the earliest and most successful promotional moments. The first teaser trailer introduced audiences to the film's overall tone, without revealing too much about the plot. Rather than emphasizing enormous superhero battles, the preview focused on espionage, hand-to-hand combat, practical action, and Natasha's mysterious past. Viewers were shown brief glimpses of Yelena Belova, Red Guardian, Melina Vostokov, Taskmaster, and the Red Room while maintaining enough mystery to encourage speculation. The trailer deliberately highlighted emotional themes alongside explosive action, signaling that Black Widow would differ from many previous Marvel productions. One of the most effective aspects of the trailer was its editing. Familiar images of Natasha from earlier Marvel films were combined with entirely new footage, reminding audiences how long they had followed her journey. This approach reinforced the idea that Black Widow was not introducing an unfamiliar hero, but completing the story of someone fans had known for over 10 years. The trailer quickly became one of the most viewed entertainment previews online, generating millions of views within its first days and dominating discussion across social media platforms. Character posters played an equally important role in the promotional campaign. Marvel released individual posters featuring Natasha, Yelena, Red Guardian, Melina, and Taskmaster. Each design used strong red, black, white, and gray color palettes, reflecting the film's espionage atmosphere. Natasha was consistently positioned as the emotional center of the campaign, while Yelena's confident expressions and tactical appearance immediately attracted attention from fans eager to learn about the mysterious new character. The main theatrical poster emphasized family rather than simply action. Natasha occupied the central position, while the remaining major characters surrounded her in carefully balanced compositions. Taskmaster appeared looming above the heroes, creating visual tension without revealing the character's true identity. This design subtly communicated that the film revolved around Natasha's personal history rather than another global superhero conflict. Marvel's promotional strategy also relied heavily on behind-the-scenes interviews. Scarlett Johansson, Florence Pugh, David Harbour, Rachel Weisz, director Kate Shortland, and Marvel Studios president Kevin Feige participated in numerous conversations discussing the production. However, Interviews carefully avoided major spoilers. Instead, cast members emphasized the emotional relationships between the characters, Natasha's search for redemption, and the film's grounded spy thriller approach. Scarlett Johansson frequently described Black Widow as a deeply personal farewell to Natasha Romanoff. Rather than promoting the film solely through spectacle, she discussed the opportunity to finally explore Natasha's emotional life after portraying the character for more than a decade. These interviews helped audiences appreciate that the movie was intended to complete Natasha's journey, rather than simply introduce another Marvel adventure. Florence Pugh quickly became one of the campaign's breakout personalities. Her humorous interviews, genuine enthusiasm, and playful interactions with Johansson attracted considerable attention across entertainment media. Many viewers who had previously known Pugh primarily through dramatic roles became excited to see her entering the Marvel Universe. Even before the film's release, audiences began predicting that Yelena Belova will become an important future character. David Harbour also contributed significantly to the campaign through his charismatic interview style. Much like Alexei himself, Harbour often combined humor with genuine affection for project. His playful stories about preparing for the role, wearing the Red Guardian costume, and working alongside the cast helped humanize the production while creating additional excitement among fans. Social media became one of the campaign's most powerful promotional tools. Black Widow occupies a unique position within both the Marvel Cinematic Universe and the broader superhero genre. Unlike many Marvel films that introduce entirely new heroes or continue large-scale interconnected storylines, Black Widow functions simultaneously as a prequel, a character study, a spy thriller, and a farewell to one of the franchise's original Avengers. Its grounded storytelling, emotional focus, and realistic action distinguish it from many other superhero films, while inviting comparisons with previous Marvel productions, classic espionage movies, female-led action films, and the earlier comic book interpretations of Natasha Romanoff. Examining these similarities and differences reveals why Black Widow remains one of the most distinctive entries in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Perhaps the most obvious comparison is with Captain America, the Winter Soldier. Many fans immediately recognize similarities between the two films because both emphasize espionage, covert organizations, political conspiracies, hand-to-hand combat, and practical action rather than supernatural powers. In both stories, highly trained operatives uncover hidden organizations, manipulating global events from the shadows. Natasha Romanoff herself played an important role in The Winter Soldier, making Black Widow feel like a natural continuation of the grounded spy atmosphere introduced in that film. However, the emotional priorities differ significantly. The Winter Soldier focuses primarily on political corruption, surveillance, institutional control, and Steve Rogers' struggle to adapt to a changing world. Black Widow, by contrast, shifts attention inward. Rather than examining government systems, it explores Natasha's personal history, family relationships, childhood trauma, and search for redemption. While both films use espionage as their foundation, The Winter Soldier investigates political ideals, whereas Black Widow investigates emotional healing. The film can also be compared to Captain America, Civil War, because both stories occur during periods when heroes become fugitives from government authorities. Natasha begins Black Widow immediately following the events of Civil War, living in isolation while avoiding capture. Yet, once again, the focus differs. Civil War explores ideological conflict between superheroes concerning responsibility and freedom. Black Widow instead asks what happens when one of those heroes is finally forced to confront the painful experiences she has spent years avoiding. Civil War divides the Avengers. Black Widow reunites a broken family. Another important comparison involves Avengers Endgame. Since Black Widow takes place before Infinity War, despite being released after Endgame, audiences experience Natasha's story with complete knowledge of her future sacrifice. This dramatically changes how viewers interpret her actions. Every compassionate decision, every reunion with Yelena, and every attempt at redemption gains additional emotional significance because audiences already know Natasha will eventually sacrifice herself to save a universe. Endgame portrays Natasha as someone willing to give everything for her chosen family, the Avengers. Black Widow explains why that willingness developed. By revealing Natasha's childhood, the Red Room, and her complicated relationship with Yelena, Alexei, and Melina, the film transforms her sacrifice from simple heroism into the natural conclusion of a lifetime spent seeking redemption and protecting others. Together, the two films complement one another, creating a more complete understanding of Natasha Romanoff's character than either could achieve independently. Within Marvel's own history, Black Widow also invites comparison with Captain Marvel. Both films feature female protagonists leading major Marvel productions and explore questions of identity, memory, and personal freedom. However, their storytelling approaches differ considerably. Captain Marvel embraces colorful cosmic adventure, intergalactic conflict, and extraordinary superhuman abilities. Black Widow intentionally remains grounded, relying on realistic combat, espionage, and emotional intimacy. Carol Danvers discovers the immense power she possesses. Natasha Romanoff discovers the emotional strength she has carried all along. The two films also differ in tone. Captain Marvel often celebrates optimism, confidence, and self-discovery through large-scale spectacle. Black Widow adopts a more mature, reflective atmosphere focused on trauma, guilt, and forgiveness. Both represent important milestones for female representation within Marvel, yet each demonstrates a different vision of heroism. Outside the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Black Widow shares many characteristics with classic espionage films, particularly those centered on professional spies rather than superheroes. The movie incorporates secret organizations, international missions, hidden identities, advanced disguises, covert operations, and psychological manipulation commonly associated with spy cinema. These influences help distinguish Black Widow from many other comic book adaptations by emphasizing intelligence and tactical planning over overwhelming physical power. Many viewers also compare the film to the James Bond franchise because both feature highly trained agents operating across multiple countries while confronting dangerous criminal organizations. Yet significant differences remain. Traditional Bond films frequently emphasize glamour, luxury, and individual confidence. Black Widow instead prioritizes emotional vulnerability, damaged relationships, and the psychological consequences of espionage. Natasha never appears fascinated by the spy lifestyle. She views it as a burden she cannot escape rather than an exciting profession. The Bourne films provide another meaningful comparison. Like Jason Bourne, Natasha Romanoff struggles with fragmented memories, institutional manipulation, and a violent past she desperately wishes to overcome. Both characters seek freedom from organizations that shape their identities through years of psychological conditioning. However, Jason Bourne searches primarily for forgotten truth, while Natasha seeks emotional reconciliation with memories she has never truly forgotten. Bourne's journey revolves around recovering identity. Natasha's journey centers on accepting it.